So this happened 19 years ago and this person's still around. So that means that person knows where the bodies are buried, for lack of a better words, and is not telling anybody, and only told this to other people who know where the bodies are buried.
Welcome to Atypical Daydream, a podcast about life on the road. I'm Josh, your host, and thanks for stopping by. My guest today is Ian Lee. He's both a drummer and a songwriter, but he also owns a tour bus company. He drives the bands all over this U.S. Ian has two stories for us today. The first finds human connection through the necessities of tour life, and the second somehow leaves you wanting more while still being pretty satisfying.
Yeah, so I had a band that was a big Led Zeppelin tribute band, so I put on a wig and played John Bonham. The band was called Led Zeppelin 2, and we did really good. And then we were touring pretty heavily, so I bought a bus for that band, thinking that the band would rent the bus from me, and that would put some more money in my pocket. And then I started getting enjoyment out of touring with, the idea was that in between the Led Zeppelin band's tours, we would rent the bus out or take other bands out. I started getting more pleasure out of that, and felt that it was a way that I could carve out a living for myself that I could kind of control. And that was I wouldn't say my first mistake, but first in a line of many mistakes. But my day starts at typically about 2 o'clock in the morning. I go to bed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and then sleep until midnight in a hotel. And then I take an Uber back to a venue and pick up a band who's just come off stage and packed all their stuff and drive them from Chicago to Detroit, and then from Detroit to, on and on it goes. About 12,000 miles is a loop around the country. I would schedule, when we first started out, I ended up scheduling my, since I was playing in the Led Zeppelin band, I scheduled a lot of stuff kind of in and out of Chicago. I have a secret spot. I actually, to this day, I have a secret parking spot in a undisclosed location in Chicago. It's in a sketchy area, to say the least, but it's sketchy enough that it's this industrial area, and there's usually a cop that parks kind of under these train tracks there, and they don't hassle you, and there's enough industrial stuff that there's no houses or anything like that, but it's just industrial enough that nobody kind of messes with you. So when we're on tour, instead of paying for a hotel every night, we just crash on the bus. And then when you're on a tour, every show, so let's say you've got 15 shows every night, part of your contract is that the venue has to provide, you have a rider, a contract that they have to provide, a cheese and meat tray and 3 bags of tortillas and hummus and 2 cases of water and a case of beer, and whatever's left over in the course of the day makes its way onto the bus. Nobody leaves booze behind. So every day you end up with 1 bottle that gets stashed in a drawer or leftovers. So the last show, we'll say, is in Detroit, and then they're from England, so they're going to play Glastonbury or whatever. So they get out and they play Detroit, and then they jump on a plane, and all of the stuff, all the food and booze that they have left over is left behind on the bus for me to deal with. There's this homeless guy that I'd always see there, and he came up to the bus one day, and he knocked on the door and he said, "Hey man, you guys, I see you guys crashing here." And I go, "Yeah, we're we got rock bands and stuff, and the cops don't hassle us and stuff." He's like, "I live under that bridge down there. How about when you take off? I see you leaving every day to kind of go and get some food and stuff. How about you give me $20 and I keep an eye on your bus?" I'm like, "That's a done deal. We'll do it." So every time we'd leave, we'd be living on the bus, and it was the middle of winter or whatever. And there's this homeless guy that we became friends with, where we'd slide him $20 and, every day we were, so we were putting $20 in his pocket every time we'd go out and run around, and he'd keep an eye on the bus. And then I keep thinking his name was Kevin or something like that. I kind of knew his name at once, but we were just kind of friends with this homeless guy, right? So what happened was, end of this one tour, and I had easily $1,000 worth of liquor. And it was cold out, and I saw the guy, and I was just like kind of in a hustle, and I'm just like cleaning the bus up, and he knocks on the door. I go, "Hey man, here's we're gonna be here for a couple of days. Here's $20." And I look over and I see like, what am I gonna do with this $1,000 worth of liquor? And I said to the guy, I said, "Hey man, I don't, I was at a crossroads, right? I'm like, he's down on his luck. He's having a hard time. Is this gonna help his situation, or is this gonna medicate him?" And I just said, "Can I ask you a funny question?" He's like, "What's up?" And I said, "Do you drink?" And he goes, "Come on, man." I go, "Listen, I see that you got like a little setup down there. If I give you some booze, would it help you get through the thing?" He's like, "Yeah, man, bring it on." So I moved $1,000 worth of booze into my homeless friend's little refrigerator box home. And that went on, I think, for about 2 years. I would kind of try to mediate it where I'd try to give booze away to other people we'd see on the road. Like if I knew I was going to see some friends or whatever the next day, I'd give them booze. But I always got in the habit where I was always keep I think at one point he said he liked scotch or something like that. So I made sure I always had a bottle of Maker's Mark left over or some good whiskey for him. And I haven't seen the guy in a few years, and I don't know anybody else in that area. Nobody's ever came up and said, "Hey, he got back on his feet or he passed away or whatever." It's just funny, these people that kind of like cross paths. And this is all because of I needed a place to park. So. And I had more booze than I don't drink anyways. And so next time you see a bus, follow them around and maybe I'll get a case of booze.
Hey, Josh here. I love making this podcast, and I'd love to make it my full-time gig. Besides telling the stories, I'm basically a one-man band, and that takes time. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider becoming a patron. You'll have access to loads of great bonus stories, and you'll have the satisfaction of knowing that you're supporting a truly independent podcast. Find the Patreon link in the show notes. And thanks.
When people ask what you do for a living, I usually say, most musicians say, well, we drive through the night and we look for a place to take a shit, because rule number 1 on a tour bus is no number 2. And the main reason for that is if you can imagine 12 people having to poop into a tank that can only get emptied once in a while, it tends to back up, and it's really bad. That's why it's the rule number 1, and nobody violates it. I've never had anyone violate it, actually, in 9 years. So fingers crossed that continues. But it's not glamorous. The main point is nothing that I'm saying is glamorous. And if you think being in a rock band and touring and all that stuff, you've watched too much MTV or whatever, or you've believed the hype, there's nothing about it that's glamorous, I can tell you. It's working 24 hours a day for about 90 minutes of work. It's just basically all downtime and driving and sleeping and looking, trying to find decent food and all this kind of thing. The crew people kind of tend to jump around. So, when you meet your crew or your band or whatever, there's a lot of, "Oh, I know that guy. I just got off tour with him. And oh, he does Madonna. And oh yeah." So there's a lot of that. So the, and there's a level of discretion in the inner circle of people who were there, who know. But then there's things that happen in the public, kind of become part of the folklore of rock and roll. And, there's stories that are out there that get embellished. And as the story gets passed along from person to person, you don't really have anybody who is really there. And so there's no point in correcting it. But I will say that the people who are in the touring business, we're the guys that know. Like anything that happened, we're the guys that were there when it actually happened. And so I'm going to read this from Wikipedia because this is considered what's true. So Wikipedia says that on August 8th, 2004, a bus belonging to the Dave Matthews Band dumped an estimated 800 pounds of human waste from the bus's Blackwater tank through the Kinzie Street Bridge in Chicago onto the passenger sightseeing boat Chicago's Little Lady sailing in the Chicago River below. Okay, how they measured that there was 800 pounds of human waste in this tank? Complete speculation. But rule number one, no number two on the bus. So it was definitely P only. A bus belonging to the Dave Matthews Band dumped an estimated 800 pounds. I can guarantee that Dave Matthews did not own his own bus. So that's a falsehood or an assumption on this Wikipedia page. Dave Matthews was leasing a bus from a bus company, and that bus company provided a driver to drive Dave Matthews Band, and the driver made that decision to empty the tanks. I can tell you that that had nothing to do with Dave Matthews. Dave Matthews did not walk up to the driver and say, I need you to empty the tanks right now because we're on the bridge over the Kinzie. This really had nothing to do with Dave Matthews. But this is the only area where there's fact. As part of the legal settlement, the band agreed to pay $200,000 to environmental protection and other projects. The band also donated $100,000 to two groups that protect the river and the surrounding areas. The band's bus driver, Stefan Wohl, pleaded guilty to dumping the waste in April 2005. So I was on a tour this last summer, and I'm going to try to not name names, but I was with a guy who works with a lot of big bands and is a person that I've done a lot of tour with. He's one of my favorite people. And he was on a tour with another guy that he claims is absolutely as respectable as, you know, your bullshit meter is usually pretty high for, if you're in the entertainment industry, you have to survive. So your bullshit meter is high. So and this is not a bullshitter guy. This is not a guy who's telling stories, but he was telling us on the bus, we started talking about this Dave Matthews story, and he said that he just got off a tour with a guy who was one of the 12 people that were on the bus that dumped the tanks. And his story was that it was not Dave Matthews' bus. The fact is that Dave Matthews paid the fine and took the hit. And the artist that he was with was controversial, for lack of a better word, the only way I can think of it. They were under some degree of media scrutiny around the time, or, you know, were considered a figure that was divisive. They were considered, in some circles, the actual artist, as opposed to Dave Matthews, who's a college rock, middle of the road, safe, nice guy. You know, Dave Matthews, pretty harmless, pretty uncontroversial. The artist who was actually in the bus that dumped the tank was not Dave. According to this source who claims to have been there, and I'm only saying this as I'm forwarding this because I would consider it a valid and reliable source, claims that Dave did this to help out and make sure no further controversy or harm came to that particular artist. I think that's about all I can say about it without giving away any other kind of hints. And if you're a crew guy, if you're one of the other 11 people that are involved in the story, you can leave a note in the comment section or DM Josh, and he'll get a hold of me or whatever, find my affordable tour solutions. But so this happened 19 years ago, and this person's still around. So that means that person knows where the bodies are buried, for lack of better words, and is not telling anybody, and only told this to other people who know where the bodies are buried.
I want to thank Ian for sharing his experiences. Make sure to check out his band, The Cle Elum, and their new single, I Am a Robot. You can also find Ian at thebestdrumerintheworld.com. And if you're in need of a tour bus, Affordable Tour Solutions is the answer. This podcast was created and produced by me, Josh Caldwell. Music by Visual Aid, my side music project. General support and copywriting by Miranda Caldwell. If you like the show, please follow, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to financially support the show, check out my Patreon page. You'll have access to loads of great bonus stories. You can find the link in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come back next week.